And good day, and welcome back to the Constitution Line by Line. I'm Paul Fabrizio.
And I'm Don Frazier.
And we are going through Article 6.
Article 6.
Clause 2.
Clause 2.
And this, you cannot underestimate, is an important part of the Constitution.
So underline it in your notes, kids.
Yeah, and it's way back in the back of the Constitution, and it's like they threw it in, but it makes an important point.
It was a rock in a sock, man.
Woo! The Supremacy Clause. Are we ready?
Yep.
This Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuance thereof, and all treaties made, or which shall be made under the authority of the United States, shall be the supreme law of the land. And the judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in this Constitution or laws or any state to the contrary, notwithstanding.
So if the federal government does it, it sticks.
Yes. Notice the Constitution, the laws of Congress, and treaties.
Well, that makes sense.
They're the supreme law of the land, not state constitutions. So
that's why
So the more I go into this Constitution, the more I wonder about all this stuff about state rights and state power. Because you read the Constitution, it's a reaction to the Articles of Confederation, and this Constitution is very, very specific that it's supreme.
Correct.
States are subordinate to it.
But that's why it's hard to amend.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how come you need Congress to pass as few laws as necessary to have the country run. Mm-hmm. And that's why the 17th Amendment was such a bad idea. Because, again,
He's looking for any excuse to bring that in.
The states have a vested interest in limiting the reach and scope of the federal government.
Because it is so powerful.
By
creation, by design.
So you got to block it from overreach.
Yeah, no getting around that. You do. But if you look at the history of the United States and you see, at worst, the Civil War and the secession, but you see the Nullification Acts, or you listen to politicians and they talk about their states' rights. And you could see it even played out in auto emissions requirements.
Oh, sure. And seatbelts and helmet laws.
Whatever, and what we call creeping federalism. In the end, the reality is that this Constitution creates a powerful central federal government.
It does.
And I don't think that many people have accepted that.
But it's the jurisdiction that you can limit.
Right. And that's a good point.
And
so in other words, what should a state be involved in? What should a federal government?
That's exactly right. So, where does it end?
Right.
And you have to be very careful to keep it pruned, or you'll have a very bushy federal government. And next thing you know, you got a tree limb through your window. And I think that is oftentimes lost in conversations about the pre-Civil War era, antebellum era. A lot of people see this as slavery as being the beginning, middle, and end of that conversation. But slavery was one of the issues that people feared creeping federalism would start to affect. So while slavery is awful and terrible and it was needed to go, nobody agreed on the mechanism for how it should go. Mm-hmm. And some people clearly defended it.
Right. They didn't want it to go.
They didn't want it to go, and they didn't want the federal government to all of a sudden claim jurisdiction over it and then make it go. And so a lot of people that claim that states' rights are the cause of the American Civil War don't even fully understand what they're saying when they say those words. But this is a kind of an important clause in an important article that cast a very oversized shadow. And it absolutely speaks to, what sort of country we're going to have and where do the states fit in. Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say. I think it's...
Well, you mentioned...
Go ahead.
Well, you mentioned the Nullification Crisis.
Yeah.
We'd probably better define that.
And we should also define creeping federalism, too.
Okay. So I'll go with the nullification. You go with that. All right. So nullification is essentially states claiming we don't agree with this particular federal law, so we're just going to set it aside and ignore it. And back in the day, in the antebellum period, had to do with tariffs, but now, and also fugitive slave law, and you could say that there may be modern counterparts to like things like sanctuary cities and all sorts of places where localities or states or principalities or municipalities just don't agree with the law of the land, so they're just going to choose to try to ignore it.
Right. Some cases that might be slow walking it.
Yes.
Another time it might be just not authorizing the expenditure of money to enforce things that you have to do.
Obedezco pero no cumplo.
Okay. We've talked about that before.
Yes, that's our favorite Spanish phrase.
Yes, it is. So there's ways to go about, yes, you have to obey the federal government, but do you really have to?
You could just look at your shoes.
Yeah.
Because what are they going to do?
Yeah. What are they do? You know, what can the federal government do to you if you're a state? And there's things they actually can do. You know, they can go to court and get a writ of mandamus and order it.
Andrew Jackson said, call out the militia.
Yeah. You know, they can also withhold federal funds for projects, that sort of stuff.
Sure.
You know, there's ways that can be done. So
points of leverage.
Yeah. But in the end, we have to realize that it's the federal government that's on top. It's the federal government that's in charge.
Driving this boat.
Yeah, and then that leads to then creeping federalism. And creeping federalism is simply the idea that over time, especially starting after or during the Great Depression, that the federal government is gradually extending its powers more and more into areas that it never has belonged before. Education being one of them, housing being another. And they
in mandated pensions.
Oh, yeah.
There's that.
Yeah, there's just a whole host of things. And you think about where's the federal government not involved, and it's really hard not to.
Yeah, you're starting to get to the point where you just can't see anything.
Yeah. What is the government not involved in? But what they do is they use their power of money to reach out and take power from the states. And they say to a state, hey, we want you to have a drinking age of 21. And so you will enact it because we have so much money for your highways.
Louisiana was an exception.
Yeah.
They said, we don't care. We're going to drink when we're 18, and we're going to have drive-through daiquiri stands, and what are you going to do about it? And the federal government said, withhold your highway funds. And Louisiana said, fine. We'll just drive through the potholes and ruts.
And eventually they got around to accepting they needed the federal cash.
After they kept having to get alignments
yes,
and repair broken axles, even Louisiana, as hard-headed as they can be, came around and said, all right. You've essentially coerced us into it.
Yeah, and what we need to realize is that almost every state in the country has to have a balanced budget. And here in Texas, you have to have a balanced budget. I think it's like 41 or 44 of the states are required to have a balanced budget. So that means you can't spend money you don't have. The U.S. government is not required to have a balanced budget. Deficit spending is okay. So the federal government has money, and they'll use that money as power to make the states do things that the states might not want to do.
So think about that next time you vote for secession.
Which I will never vote for.
Well, California's the last ones to bring it up.
Right. Okay, so.
That's your home state.
Yes, I know.
Okay.
And yours is Texas.
That's right.
Okay, there we go. Is that it?
That's
Anything
our
else
line.
you want to say
Nope.
on Supremacy Clause?
That's a good one to know. All right, that's our line. We'll pick up the next line next time. Thanks.